All right, welcome to another Gray Pages. Guys, we've been getting into all kind of amazing conversations, and we've talked a lot about economy and things in the past, and even like business and the way we like invest in and build things. But like, I feel like we should talk about like personal, like how are we like how are y'all making it? How are we getting by? How are people in the ecosystems funded or funding themselves or like there's a lot of I think good questions about shoot, I have questions like how do we make this work, right? And so is that how's that sound is like something we could dig into a little bit like
Yeah. What's crazy to me is I've begged older guys to tell me, "Hey, how have you made it financially?" And I feel like I've never got a clean answer from anybody. It's all, and I think that's because most of us grew up with this thought that we really should never tell anybody
mm,
how. I mean, that's what you're taught, right? You don't talk about your finances with anybody, but we're talking about a communal faith
yeah.
with an axe economy where people are consolidating resources and there has to be some transparency, I think,
Yeah.
especially for what we call the front edge apostolic prophetic leaders that start and or initiate the ecosystems, because I think it is a very unique calling. I think it pushes you on a financial level that you may not get pushed at all if you're making your income from inside the church bubble, pastor, teacher, that type of thing. I think the apostolic prophetic is it's just a unique calling, and it requires a unique perspective on what we do with money. So yeah, I mean,
It also seems to be one of our most asked
yeah,
questions. I don't know if that's a good thing. Sometimes it feels a little concerning to me. And I'll explain why, or I'll just kind of give a quick of why I feel that way is because typically when I meet or spend time with um, someone of the apostolic ilk, that doesn't seem to be
but
a super pressing question.
I, can I let me share? So this was yesterday. I feel like this is gonna relate to what you guys are saying, and well, hopefully it does. Or it won't take us too far off. I was in a conversation yesterday with a dude that smart dude worked with a lot of for-profit, nonprofit. He's mostly in the education space, works with a lot of schools, whatever.
yep.
And they made so here in Hillsborough County, there's been a big thing with our county commissioners related to nonprofits. So a lot of them get money from the county or historically have gotten money from the county. And there's some new leadership over the last couple of years. And they're like, hey, we need to shut it down. And they're coming up with these like things that they're like, so one of them is if a CEO of a nonprofit makes over $200,000 a year, like we're not funding them anymore. And that was one among a bunch of these.
Right.
And it was interesting. So he brought that up, and I was like, and by the way, there is like some of these nonprofits, like I look at them, I'm like, yeah, like some of these really need to be put under microscope and think about how we're using money or whatever. But it's weird. Like as a reaction, I don't think there's any problem with that if you have a big enough agency. So like, I do think if you have talented leadership that you don't want to lose to private market and you have a big enough like private sector and you have a big enough entity that can like justify and afford that, like I have no problem with top talent being paid like well so they can like not go I need to get pulled away into these other things. But interestingly enough, and he like jokingly he's like, well, you want to make that, and I'm like, well, that would be awesome. But incidentally, and this is I guess maybe part of the apostolic thing, like I was like, well, I really couldn't. And this isn't like we couldn't have much. I think this is interesting about like my own posture. And I wonder about like what you're getting at because I'm like, well, I couldn't because of what needs to be built.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
we have neighbors, like everybody needs to eat. I have staff that I need to take care of. I have things that we need to build. Like there's so much to invest in
Yep.
that I actually need to have a posture. It isn't like, even sacrificial. It's like, no, like what I want is for all of us to be good. And it just occurred to me, like, if ever I'm making that, then we've done really well for our city because
Yeah.
does that map a little bit?
Yeah.
Like,
And the reality is, for most of the people starting kingdom ecosystems, they're not going to be these, you know, lavish organizations. They are boots on the ground, struggling through. And so the reality for the apostolic leader is just like you were saying, they can't take the money, even though there's some money inside the network. So Taylor and I have at least said on podcasts that we don't take any money from this ecosystem here. When we started it, I had visions of, hey, someday maybe that'll go okay. And maybe we could pull 20, 30, 40 grand a year or something like that as I get older or something. I mean,
That'd be
so
great.
I had those
Yeah.
thoughts.
Yep.
But as we keep building, you get to where you cannot take the money. Because there's other things that get in the way, or your constant movement towards growth. And so it does beg the question, does the apostolic leader have to think about money differently than the standard worker? Like, we have lots of people that make their income from our ecosystem.
Yeah.
I can't ask them to view money like I view money, or like Taylor and Lindsay view money.
Yeah, it would be wrong, right? To go, yeah,
Yeah.
like do this job for nothing. It's like,
Or in your case, you know, the 200K guy that you really need because of, you know, something that you have to get done in the org. I just think for most of the people doing this, there's going to be this moment where you've got to decide that you probably need to get funding from a unique source so that you can be, as the scriptures say, a man without guile or a woman without guile, which basically means living your life without guile means you literally don't have an ambitious dog in the hunt. Like there's no little 5% that you're trying to like take a rake off the top of a deal or something like that. To be without guile would mean that you'd be completely trustworthy. So if God saw that you're faithful with a little, he might drop $1 million on you because he knows you don't have, like, I'll talk about Cheryl. Like, Cheryl doesn't have the ability in her personality and character to not tell the truth, like 100%. I can't. I can find Rahab lies all the time, you know, but she just can't. When we think about being a person without guile, you're incorruptible, if you will. And I feel like the apostolic leaders have to start thinking this through. I know in the book we shared a passage that I stood out to me when Taylor first brought it up, but it's, you know, if the lamp of your eye is jacked up, you know, it's going to screw up the whole deal, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
we always say in the book, or when we're training people, like, you got to make sure you got to get your eye right in your community. The young people will go after you. Like, people come out to our farm and they go, well, frickin' Halter's got a 80-acre farm, and they start to just get a little pissy. It's probably because their eye's not right. So they start to compare and envy. So, you know, there's a lot of issues related to, you know, your leadership in that. But I just think we need to talk about it. I also think a lot of people listening to this are not maybe even the apostolic leaders, they're potential funders. Like, they want to give money to God's stuff, but they're just tired of all the corruption and BS.
Mm-hmm.
You got that Platt quote?
Yeah. We were having a conversation before we got on, John, just about the way that even in kind of church planting or ministry or missionary contexts, I think I don't want to elevate the apostolic prophetic calling too much, but when that grit and that commitment to a life without guile is not there, a lot of times any end can justify some pretty corrupt means. And we've seen that all throughout church history of just making very shady decisions because we decide that, well, the end justifies the means. And I remembered this quote that I read a few years ago, that a pastor named David Platt shared in an article I'll read the quote and we can kind of talk about it, but he said, I hate the politics of the SBC. The SBC is a denomination, one of the largest denominations in the world. He said, and I don't say that as an outsider, I say that as an insider. These last 4 years, some of the lowest points in my leadership have been when I found myself participating in them, jockeying for position, continual self-promotion, backroom deals followed by spin in the front room, strategizing like brothers are your enemy, feeling like others see you as their enemy, getting to the point where you wonder if you can trust anyone, even as you start to wonder how trustworthy you've become.
Mm.
Now, here's my quick take on that, with grace and mercy is the little that I know about this man, and I've spent some time with him. You've spent some time with him. Man, I just think this guy is in love with Jesus and the kingdom. And there's no qualifier there, but I think that he's in a tradition, a line of so many leaders that have allowed the end to justify the means.
Which would make it impossible to succeed if you are a band without guile. You would have to pick.
You'd have to pick, because I
That's right.
want to share personal testimony, but I don't want to share it from the position of I'm not capable of this, because I think I'm capable of all kinds of evil. But if I ever found myself in a position like this, I'm out. I'm gone. Like there's no hesitation. I don't want it. I don't want your money. I think Paul gave these really specific warnings that when we read between the lines, we start to realize, oh, he was speaking through an apostolic bullhorn. He was allowing us to see through an apostolic and prophetic lens. Why did he say what he said about marriage? Well, I'm sitting in it right now. Married almost 17 years, 5 young kids. And I know in my soul that right now I'm in a season that I got to take care of these kids. And anybody who watches me and knows me knows I freaking love it. I give myself to it. I'm in. Like it is not a yoke, but it is a burden that I bear and I carry. And we were talking last night about this. Hugh's past that season and he's still carrying that burden for his grown married kids who are parents now and for his grandkids. Paul knew this, so he gave us a little warning like, hey, I'm going to tell you something. This is going to be a burden that you have to carry now. I think he gave us another warning, again, kind of cloaked in his own testimony of him saying, I never needed from anyone. I learned how to make my own money.
Yep.
So even as we're talking about like being a CEO of a nonprofit making 200,000 a year, that conversation, it so eludes me.
Right.
And it so eludes all three of us. I know this because I know you guys, because we're like, we don't even think in those terms. Like that's not like, what's my yearly salary? I swear to God, I could not tell you.
Yeah.
I do not know. My wife doesn't know.
It's whatever numbers you kind of try to figure out.
It's
Yeah.
just like,
It's
yeah,
like, here's what I was able to.
yeah. I mean, I think there's a level of responsibility there where we go, we need to, do this and that. It is so hard to have this conversation with someone who's not in this stream.
Yeah.
Because it feels dangerous. It feels like you're inviting them into something cracked or shaky or
This
unstable.
does happen all the time. We'll be 2 days into a consult with a family that really wants to start like a Brave City, and it'll finally be a conversation around the dinner table where the husband or the wife or both go, look, like we got 3 kids, and if we go this way, we'll probably not be able to keep our job at the church. And so you just see it, But there will be these apostolic leaders that go, no, we have to go anyway. And they dive into this weird mystery of funding that has to reveal itself after you jump, so to
So
speak.
we wrote a section. Go ahead, John.
No, I was just gonna say, I think that's exactly right. And even why I brought up the like CEO thing is one of those is like a job, someone having a job versus you can't not do it. So this like these like apostolic, like jump in and figure it out that you're talking about. There is a group of people that are like called to, compelled to like do this work and can't not do it. I think I forget what other episode we use that kind of language, but it's like you
Yep.
can't not do it. And then,
There's
oh,
a
by the
hook
way,
in
I
me.
do
Yeah.
need my kids do need some shoes though,
Yeah.
right?
But that's what I'm saying. That's what I mean. If someone came to me in Tampa and they said, "Oh, I know John Dangler. He could never make $1 million a year," I would go, "Sure he could. Sure he could. He just wouldn't know he's making it. He wouldn't care if if there was a patron that came into his corner and started funding him $1 million a year, I would wager nothing would change for John.
Yeah.
He'd probably pay some debt off.
Yeah, I'd be able to fix my car when it broke down, but other than that, things would change for the community around me.
But that's what I'm
I would be
saying.
so excited to get my hands on resources like that. It's gas for the tank, basically.
By the way,
And that's real quick. That's why it's so hard to have this conversation when it's like, well, how much should I make? I have no,
How much do you need?
how much do you need?
Yeah, right.
Like what am I worth?
people have asked me, how much are you trying to raise? And I go, we're trying to help an entire city. So like I can't give you a number. Like a typical organization, they go like, we're trying to raise 300 grand for our budget. But when you're apostolic, you just know that God's called you to bind and loosen and start things, and every day is a weird day. Like there's days that you just get up and you walk and you pray. You can't monetize that. There's other days. I was thinking how many leaders came into Alton in the last couple of years just to meet with us. And I think we tried to charge a couple of them, but I think
It was funny every time
every
we
time they
even
come through, we're like,
we'll mentors and coaches in our life will tell us you have to charge for these.
some said we should charge 8,000 a day.
And we'll do it. We'll throw something out there
We did like that idea.
because this sounds like a cop out. I don't mean it this way. We'll be like, okay, we want to honor that suggestion. And then it just kind of falls apart. It
Yeah.
never works.
But what does work is when people come through and they go, can we get 3 or 4 hours? We generally, if we're around, we go, yeah. And we enjoy it. We love it. But you can't call that a job and figure out how to fund that. You're called to this. We're called, you're apostolic, you're called to create patterns and movement for people.
But I try to imagine Jesus, and this is a dangerous exercise sometimes because I don't know if he would do any of the things that we do, but
Well, yeah, just real quick before you say what Jesus, because I'm like, I think about this a lot and I'm like, man, I want an entourage of ladies to pay for everything.
yeah,
which is a little bit what you see too.
a little bit.
Well,
Yeah.
we're gonna get to that because for those of you that
we're getting there.
We're driving you nuts right now with this.
Yeah,
we are
yeah,
gonna get to how we think.
Yeah,
By the way, it is important to note that when you say pay for everything, sometimes that meant a loaf of bread a week. So,
right.
But I try to imagine Jesus in thinking back on that Platt quote, like in these boardrooms, jockeying for position, trying to paint certain people in certain lights so you can get more money, trying to embellish just a bit on the needs of the poor in your context so that you can up the ante of the donor. And man, I just can't find any lens to look through to go, that's the man that we follow.
No, he said not so with you explicitly.
Yeah.
Like that's like, he's like, you see how you see how they do this in the nations. You see how they lead. You see how they use authority over. You see that thing? That's not how it's going to be with you.
Yeah.
That's a great one to remember. It's not like Jesus would give us 10 different options on how to play this. He actually, like, you can't serve both God and the currency of the Roman money, right? That's what he meant by mammon. This will not be so with you guys. Like, it's pretty clean cut. Like, we're supposed to shoot for no guile. So, how do we serve God and pay the bills without guile? I'm heading out tomorrow on a little trip for me. So I'm 58. And we have, because of whatever, fixing and flipping houses, 13 of them over our marriage, we've been able to acquire real estate. Like we live on a pretty cool place right now. So people will look at that and go, well, that came through getting salaries and making a lot of money, and it didn't. It came through weird circumstances.
It's not that nice though. It's just cool.
It's very cool.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's certainly not elegant, but
It would be a
it's
nightmare
fun
for me, a lot
for
of people
sure.
to live on that.
But
80
people drive
acres.
up and go, oh crap.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's not Yellowstone though.
Yeah, you said it was Yellowstone one day, and I argued. Anyway, so I just want people to know, like, we're not living in tents. Taylor and Lindsay right now are in a 5,000 square foot fantastic house, but that house was donated to our network. So people could never look at what you see and go, oh, they made that through getting 120 a year salary and they're killing it. That's never the case with an apostolic leader. Oftentimes they will end up with cool stuff, but they're still generally by faith cash poor. In other words, you don't, like I tell people all the time, right now the halters have enough money to pay the bills in 4 days. That's when we pay the bills. But we don't know how we're going to pay the bills 2 weeks from now. We could take loans off of our land. We could take some out of a cheesy little retirement fund that I hear is supposed to be 800,000 by now. That's not. So we can go find money if we want to pull it out of I could sell a car. But if we just go, okay, what income is coming in? We don't know technically. And that's been the way it has been for the halters for 33 years. And somehow we've eked it through. But I would say in the apostolic funding model, there is always going to be this element of unique faith that something is going to happen. What I would say, I want to kind of bring up this trip that I'm taking is really to find what we call a patron. And in the Brave City book, we bring up the Medici family, early part of the 15th century. These cats out of Florence area, they start, they're the royals. They start the bank of the town, and they're known for all sorts of stuff. Funding the Renaissance was just one of them. So they went to artists, and that's why we talk about the archaeology, artistry, and architecture of kingdom. So at some point, the kingdom is built from artists. Artists do unique things that bind and loosen things in cities, right? But generally, if you ask artists, how are you going to make a living? Most of them they're kind of like we are. They're not quite sure. They just have a passion for what they want to do and what they feel like they're supposed to do. So the Medici family, they went, hey, our town doesn't have a lot of great art. We're just going to fund you completely so you can create. And that's where we essentially get the Renaissance. So sometimes, I had 10 years of donor support through a ministry called Youth for Christ. And I mostly, as a young 20-something-year-old, I don't know if I was ever completely without guile in my donor support letters, or because I was insecure. I was trying to, it's all that young stuff. It's what Platt ended up with.
Well, you were probably trained how to fundraise,
how to fundraise,
which is a
there's
dangerous.
a ton of people at $25 a month, and I got to write a letter. That's not what patronage is. Patronage would be that you find people that know what your art is. They know what you're gifted at, and they go, we just want you to do you.
Or in part, I would say they find you. The Medici family found the artists.
Yeah, but the word probably got out eventually, and then artists were like, hey,
Yeah.
how do we get a little moment with the Medicis, you know?
Yeah.
But I'm not looking for donors. I'm not looking for people that I have to explain or puff up numbers. I want people that know me personally, that look at the body of work and go, wherever you go, something seems to happen that the world needs. And so we're just going to free you up. So if you need to pray and walk all day, great. If you need to renovate a building, like do what you do.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, the post commas got started because one couple in Iowa said, when you figure out what God wants you to do in Alton, call us. We feel like we want to be a part of it financially. They never asked us anything. That they just went, when I said, I think we got to renovate this building and create a space for our town, they were like, yeah, great, whatever, here you go. That's what a patron is. There's no strings attached to it. They're not asking me to figure out how to scale it or whatever. They just go, we believe in you. And that's unique to apostolic funding. Um, my guess is Paul, if he had had a patron, he wouldn't have had to write all those things in there where he's kind of fighting for his apostolic leadership, and you know, where he gets so ticked off he says, screw it, I'm just going to work amongst you so I'm not a burden to anybody. My guess is he just never had a patron. But I feel like we've got to begin to shoot for that. I sent out an email to about 20 friends. I said, hey, if Hugh Halter were to really give the best Hugh Halter to the world on my last 20, 25 years, what would be my superpower? And I got a bunch of really great responses. But I had one quote from a young church planter that has become a very close friend. And he just sent me a note. I kept it. To me, it's the primary one that I felt like God was speaking to me about. But he said, hey, I just rolled through the post commas. My kids are playing soccer in St. Louis. So I wanted to just come see the post, see, you know, what it looks like. He goes, by the way, it's fantastic. And he goes, while I got you, I just want to thank you for all the years that you walked me through all of my ministry thinking. And he's a part of a mega church in a city, and he caught the missional bug. And so we just had tons of conversations, and I would drive out and spend a couple days with he and his family and lots of dinner conversations. But he was basically just thanking me. He's like, you guided me through every thought process related to my ministry and life. And he goes, at the end, he said, but the one thing that just really stood out is you've never charged me any money. And he referenced later that there were a lot of other people he's talked to about me that knew me either through writings or whatever. He said they all said the same thing, like you just served them. And I think about all these leaders that come through that Taylor and I just, we love to meet and talk and try to encourage or catalyze vision or whatever. And the very best part, I think, as you get older, you have to start working towards this to where you give away all the things that God's given you. So the gifts that he gives us, you just give them back to him, you know? And yeah, it's nice when people might say, hey, thanks for the time. Here's a little check or whatever. I certainly don't say no to that. But the patronage idea is that you can literally give your best self to the world without guile, and you can just serve. Now, a lot of people would love the patron, but they're not trustworthy, or they haven't put in the body of work, or their eye is not right. And so for those of you that are funders, I would say consider that the metaphor of John Dangler in Tampa. If you give John $1 million, he's going to build the community. So find people that you go, doesn't matter how much I give them, they're going to parlay that into good stuff and pure stuff and trustworthy stuff. So I'm on a bit of a journey now because things do change when you're older. Cheryl's health is worse. We've always kind of rolled the dice with health insurance and weird stuff. And, there's things that even helping our kids or whatever, there are things that are more costly now than we thought they would be. And what happens if you don't find patrons is you have to take stuff that's not as strategic to do. And so,
Oh, sorry.
yeah, go ahead, John.
Well, no, I just was on the other side of the story. Like when you know, as we started building up our organization, I was obviously, and I came out of like a parachurch thing where it was like, I had like a donor base and donor relationships and still do many of like, I still have a handful of folks that are just like, you know, we regularly kind of give to the work. And I'm super grateful for them. We wouldn't have got any of this started without them. But I remember specifically, and this is a little bit connected to even like how social enterprise or building business even came into my mind in a way was there was a couple things that really like were hard for me in like conscience. Like this wasn't about raising money, but there was like necessities for that, right? So one of those had to do with like photographing things. And I just had this like Jesus voice in my mind always going like, don't let the left hand know what the right is doing. And I felt, and because I worked with vulnerable populations, I was like, I'm not doing that. In fact, I don't want you to bring a camera to this. That's like wrong. And so I had a real issue there, which means you can't send a good letter or something like that. But on the flip side, and this is where it really got me, this one like ate me up at night. Like I felt like it was going to make me sick. There was I recognized that I was biting my tongue um, when something should have been said in certain situations because of I felt like I need your money or
Yeah.
I can't lose this donor or there was some like dependent
And that's
thing.
easy to justify because she goes, I'm gonna give it to these folks that need it anyway, so I might as well just not deal with that comment you
Let
just
it
made.
fly. But
Yeah.
there was one in particular moment where someone that was a donor and a supporter and a friend, which I actually felt like it was betraying the friendship and everything, like did something, said something in the presence of people we were working with that was like, I absolutely needed to speak up. I needed to say something and I didn't. And it was one that like I couldn't sleep all night. And I was like, I have to remedy this. And so I have to talk to that person. I just relationally, I can't do that. I have to like think about who was there and like talk to them. But also this is where I had like the conviction was like, I need to learn how to not need this money. Like it's
Right.
fine to get it, but
That's
I
right.
need to not need it. And that's where I was like, we need to grow our own. So whenever
Put
we
a
could
pin in
sell some of
that.
this produce, yep.
All the other virtuous stuff that you're referencing is good. And I think people can relate to that. We've all been through it. We've all sat in the room when the you know 1% of the 1% of the 1% guy comes in and the energy in the room shifts and we know there's something prophetic in us that knows like I'm not down with this, man. I'm not enjoying the posture of everyone around me
Mm-hmm.
offering him a more significant seat at the table than they would this man who has very little in his pockets, but very much in his soul.
By the way, a little heads up on how do you know if that person is like that or not? And I would say in my life, the men that I think might be a part of funding something that have to keep having more and more meetings to talk like you're on your 13th meeting and you keep meeting going, well, maybe this will be the one that finally releases it. When you're with those types of people, that's probably going to go to the dark side.
Yeah, call it.
Usually people that are quick, they hear about it and they go, I just want to meet with you. And they just flat out say, I want to be a part of what you're doing and then do it quickly. Those are the right people.
But that
Like, don't chase is what I would say.
absolutely. And but you made a point, and I'm going to read something in a minute, but you made a point, John, where you said that's when I realized I need to not need this. And I think that's really the crux of what we're talking about today.
Mm-hmm.
Not like be virtuous, don't love money, get your eye right. All these points, yes. Patrons over donors, yes, absolutely. But there's this section in the book where I don't know how deep we went because it got edited a lot, but it's in the Apostolic chapter. But we basically talk about the philosophy and the ideology. Maybe ideology is too strong of a word, but the idea of Paul being a tent maker and how he held this position. And by the way, just for the sake of, argument and what people hear and think, I do think that Paul had patrons. I don't know how much and where and when. Sometimes it's referenced as whole cities. I think there was maybe the church in Philippi gave him money, or maybe in Philippi, I think maybe Jerusalem. So there were probably people everywhere that he went. But even still, I don't think Paul would have even known. And I really feel this way. So this is more than an opinion. It's deeper than that. It's like, I don't know, but I feel like I know. I don't think he even would have known what he was being given, because I think for him, it was never a matter of, I need you to do this. It's going to increase whatever I do.
Paul was the pass through.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. 10
Yeah.
million could pass through, or $10.
So I really have no problem. I feel no conviction, no prophetic urge at all when I tell someone, you would be really wise to give to our family,
Totally.
to be a patron to our family. Like,
Yeah.
if somebody's like, we're not sure what to do, I'll give an example, man. I was just doing a project the other day. I'm working on a big project right now, and I texted a buddy of mine who's a builder in Tennessee. I texted him a picture and I said, hey, what do I do right here? I don't know what to do with this.
Mhm.
And he was like, you want to do this, this, and this. And I did it, and that worked. I sent him a pic. I was like, dude, perfect. Thank you. And he goes, what are you doing? I told him, and he sends me this long text, and he goes, hey, listen, we've been struggling, like we're doing really good, but we're having a hard time finding a place where we want to like pour our lives into. We haven't been giving to anything. He used the word tithe. Most evangelicals use the word tithe as a replacement for giving. They don't mean it in the biblical sense of, I give a tenth, but he was like, we don't know where to tithe. Uh, do you have anything we can give to? And I was like, absolutely. Give to us. And he was like, I can just tithe to you guys. And I was like, yeah, you can. And like that day, $300 came into a nonprofit thing. The reason I even tell that story vulnerably, because it could be kind of cut up by people who want to use it or weaponize it, is I'm saying, I want people to understand this isn't a poverty gospel. This isn't some idea of like, we're committed to pain and suffering. We're committed to having nothing. No, we don't see money the way that our culture has taught us to see money.
Mhm.
I don't think it's because we're strong or we're brave or we're heroic. I think it's something in that apostolic genetic that's freed us from being able to like be driven by this thing. I think Paul got money all the time, but he also gave us this ethic of work, of building tents and creating. Every Pauline historian that I've read so far, I think Douglas Moo is one of the ones who wrote a lot about this, talk about Paul's tent making enterprise. Mm-hmm. How it wasn't that he just went and sewed a quick tent, but he was literally like a landlord. He was like a property manager. Everywhere he went, he was creating these dwellings, and he had teams that were working with him. And this was funding a lot of what he did. And so I think that he gave us some secrets, some clues into, you want to travel, you want to get on a boat, a plane, a car, go do this, go that, and not have to have in the back of your mind, how am I going to do this? I can teach you about patrons. I can teach you about creating funding for yourself. And the biggest thing, I'm ending it on what we started with, John. I can teach you to not need to have that, as John Goodman says it in the book, in the movie The Gambler, to have that FU position where you're like, give your money or don't. I don't care. I'll get up from this table and leave and not think twice about it. But you would be smart to give it.
So what's that mean practically? You might, like in your story, you might have to let people know what you're up to. That doesn't have to come with guile. Like you don't have to paint some weird picture. Some of your friends actually probably love you, but they probably have no idea that you even have any needs. So that
Yeah.
might be okay. Let a few
Make
So I
me
want to
friends.
I want to say something about that. That's really important. I think in the apostolic journey, and if you probably know this already, but every time we use this idea of apostolic, we're just referencing missionary. We're referencing like the servant leader. We're here to serve the movement. It is not a position of authority. So read the book and you can learn more about that. But in the apostolic prophetic journey, Lindsay and I would say you are a fool if you don't have a handful of intercessors and potentially patrons around the country or the world who you can constantly tell about what you're doing. If you don't have that, because in the places you live, you are basically in the kindest sense of the term, you're used by everyone. Everyone is saying, can you do this for me? Can you do this for me? Can you help me with this? Can you counsel me through this? Can you build this for me? Can you get this for me? Can you connect me with this? To have 5 to 10 to 12 intercessors and patrons around the country, around the world that you can say, can I talk to you about what I'm doing right now? Like, this sounds kind of lame, but can you be proud of me? Can you like tell me good job? Hey, I need about 40 more sheets of drywall. Can you help me out with that? Hey, I got invited to go to Canada, which we did recently. They can't fund it. Can you fund it? Because we feel like we're supposed to go. And it's like, boom, absolutely. I got you. We're good. I'm praying. I'm hearing for you. Here's one last thought, and then jump back into that. When you're hurting, when your kids are sick, when it's kind of a moment of darkness, the reality is not only can you not, but I would argue, y'all push back on this, you should not put that on your community.
Correct.
They don't need it, man. But you got to put it on somebody, or you're going to slip into something where you start doing some kooky stuff. So you need these people, you need these intercessors, and you need these patrons. And I have almost never met someone in this calling that God hasn't provided those people.
Yeah. So think about it differently. Don't think about it the same as you always have, you know. And obviously there's in both of ours, in your story, there's actual manual labor. We talk about having multiple buckets of income. That's an apostolic way. So you work those buckets, and some of them might be getting on a plane, sharing your story with potential patrons. Sometimes it's fixing and flipping a house. But when you do all that and you don't have a dog in the hunt, you can just be a pass through. My guess is you'll see more resource come in than you thought was possible. I always say, look, if God's going to call artists, God doesn't want crappy art. God owns all the cattle on 1,000 hills, as we say, but He does feed you one burger at a time. That's the other part of that saying, like that. The way of God is never to front load so much you're without tension or stress. So God likes to give it the way I would give to my own kids. I would just give them what they need.
Isn't there a prayer somewhere, Proverbs or Psalms, where the guy says, God, I pray that you don't give me so little that I question or doubt you, but also ask that you not give me so much that I start to not need you.
Sounds like a good Irish thing, but could be.
You know what I'm talking about, John?
Yeah, I'm looking it up.
While you're looking it up, here's one other. Paul says in Acts 20, I've not coveted anyone's silver or gold or clothing. And you know that my hands supplied mine and my companions' needs, and that it is by hard work that we must help the weak. So take those two thoughts. Did you find the prayer?
Yeah, it's Proverbs 30, verse 9. And let's see. There's all these translations. Here's one. Otherwise I may have too much and disown you and say, who is the Lord? Or I may become poor and steal and so dishonor the name of my God.
Yeah. So he's actually praying. If you read before that, this is a prayer.
Yep.
He says, God, only give me what I need. Right? Something like that.
What number is that again?
Proverbs 30.
30.
Good solid work though. I really thought that was an Irish saying.
Yeah, so actually here it says, two things I ask of you, Lord. Do not refuse me before I die. Keep falsehood and lies far from me. Give me neither poverty nor riches, but give me only my daily bread. Otherwise I may have too much and disown you and say, who is the Lord? Or I may become poor and steal and so dishonor the name of my God.
Yeah.
Man, that was perfect. Talk about like the guile piece of that. It's such a perfect
It's like he knows himself. He knows he can be swayed on either side. The prayer is no guile. I love that. Huh.
It's really good. This was a helpful conversation. I do think maybe like right to close it out, like, I mean, I don't know, like maybe it might be helpful to people listening to, I mean, you've kind of named a few things, but like at the very practical level. So like I could say over the last like couple years, some things that come to mind. You know, I've made some logos for some people, for some companies. I've done some contract like video work or like editing work. I've laid tile. Um I have I have done junk removal, which is actually something I love because it's also like a treasure hunt. So
You
this
sold
rich
drugs
dude,
for a while too?
huh?
I thought you sold drugs for a while too. No.
It's been a minute. It's been a
I
minute.
feel
No, I
like
haven't.
I do feel like junk removal is part of every apostle's story.
Junk removal is the best because it's like it's a treasure hunt.
Well, you get
But
money
and
to
you get
then
stuff.
get good stuff.
It's the
Yeah.
best. And then you open up your thrift shop. Um, I do think it'd be helpful to kind of name some of those things. And then I just before you guys do, I want to also say like this is a frustration personally, but as I imagine, like let's say having lots of resources, or if I had a lot of resources, and I think of you guys, and I think of like what you're like, if the question you asked Hugh about being like given the best Hugh to the world for the rest of your life, and like there's something there's something beautiful about Hugh going, I'm willing to go paint this house and spend the week kind of doing what I got to do and right and good about it so that you can give your time away and do these things. But there's something really frustrating too about like you not doing your thing that you're like your highest and best use
Totally. That's a great
because of
point.
the need for money. And like if I have money, I'm like, I don't want you laying tile, dude. Like you're supposed to be about the kingdom, right? You're
But
supposed to be doing
John,
this work.
I think this is critical. What I found in my own life is like if I had funders 25 years ago, I would ask them to patronize, put a chunk of money in a bank and let me develop a real estate portfolio.
Yeah.
So I would ask
Something they
to
could not
use the
need it in time to
funding,
create. Yep.
but now approaching 60, I'm now asking fund me to be free of time to just give my time to anybody. I get so many emails every day of people just wanting time. I don't want to go do the tile job anymore.
Yep.
I would for sure.
Have to.
But you have to decide again, at what stage of life are you in? I think if I am funding Taylor, personally, if I had money and he goes, I need some cash, I would expect that he would go, I'd like to do real estate with that.
Yeah,
And
let's put it into
he's gonna
something that
build
is
off of that.
productive. Yep, that's
Yeah,
right.
others of you that your life has been a proof of concept, if you will. So like we've planted 3 churches essentially in really weird ways. So we've learned a lot now. So I'm better for the kingdom, probably not tiling
Right.
that much in the future. Like just be more of a sage, coach, encourager.
I agree with all
So-
that, but I do want to push back a little bit and just say what we also have to keep in front of us and keep in front of other people is that we don't operate in the same timeline that this culture or this world has taught us to operate. So we don't ascend to positions of, what, help me out. Like I want to say a word this
like retirement.
right. For sure, retire, but we don't even want to retire. Like that's not even the idea. We don't ascend to positions of like, now we just make money based on our
Oh,
on our
residual, like,
Thought
yeah.
leadership.
our thought leadership. Like there is, and here's what the only reason I'm saying this is
I understand. Yeah, right. Because of the
I've seen in both of your lives, and I could name 5 others right now off the top of my head, that the work of their hands has kept them near to God, near to the poor, and near to this position of contrition. We don't understand the detriment that it causes in our souls to elevate ourselves to positions of elevation.
by the way,
That's a
though, I
redundant
just want
statement.
to, I think that's exactly
Yeah.
right, but it's
Let
unimaginable.
me say that to elevate ourselves to positions of maybe authority.
Non-activity. Like
So
we should always be a player coach, even if we're moving more into coaching others. There's got to be a player.
even
Coach
authority
element.
is not the right word, but go ahead. What were you going to say, John?
Well, I was gonna say like the whole like labor piece. That's an unimaginable like scenario for me. I mean, genuinely, because of my makeup and because of its role in my life, even vocationally and in prayer. But like for instance, like there is real work. Like we just picked up a trailer that we need to like build out and do the refrigeration on, right?
Right.
I'm going to be very strapped on time and money for the material resources for that. That it isn't like that's like a paying gig, right? But like being strapped on time and money is tough when you're like, well, I can't pay someone else to do something here, or but like the need to make money then might be I'm going to go put time and labor in to lay tile for somebody else, right? So like if you free me up from that and I have the time and money, I'm like, I'm gonna build this trailer and then I'm gonna build that home. And then I'm gonna like the actual labor piece of it, I think is not a I think is what you're getting at. Like you don't
That
want to like
is,
leave that behind. And I'm like, I'm not leaving that behind. I would never ask for that. Nor
that's
I'm like,
exactly right.
I want to lay golden pavers in the kingdom, like in the,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? But like, I want to do it for in perpetuity.
Before we started today, before you hopped on, Hugh was like, he said to me, he said, "When is the last day that you just didn't do anything?" And I kind of looked at him,
physically working on something.
yeah, and I looked at him, I was like, "When's the last day you didn't do any? Like, what are you even talking about?" Because the thought of that is silly to me. It's not because I'm a hard worker, it's because this is my worship. What we build, what we do, our work. So again, I love what you're saying. Let's get back to the idea of need one more time. Do I need to lay tile, or am I
Right.
laying tile because I want to serve this person or this person? And I think the crux of what we're saying, like the climax of this conversation, is God, give us what we need.
Yeah.
It's that Proverbs 30 prayer. It's like, I want to go and work on this home for this family because I can. I don't want to have to say I can't do this because I need money. And at the same time, so that's this side of the conversation. Now the donor side, I want to call this guy and tell him about what I'm doing because he loves me.
Yeah.
And I love him.
Mm-hmm.
If I think for 1 second, and I have receipts of this, that he needs my proof and evidence, he's deleted from my phone. Like, I will burn your money in front of you. I think there is an ethic here of that we probably need to go deeper into, in writing and in person and in more like coaching conversations, that it's the idea of need. I don't need this and I don't need this. So God, whatever you can put in my life, if it's house flipping, marketing. My buddy in Atlanta that's been on the podcast before, he does a ton of design work and film work, and he's on retainers doing this, which that's all rental properties are, is retainers. And he's like, God, just give me the skills that I need so that I don't need these. And now I can do both. I love donors. We call them patrons. I love laying tile. I don't want to need either.
My prayer for 20 years during our worst years, when Ryan was having his 20 seizures a day and we were trying to plant churches, I literally would just say, God, either send it in the mail or send me paint jobs. And it literally played out like that. There'd be sometimes months where just get weird donations would come in.
We have
And
the
then
same
I
story.
get
It's
nothing
crazy.
for 8 months, and I would have people call me to paint. So anytime anybody asked me to work, that was never a prayer. I was like, yeah, I'll always work
I
when
don't
get
have to
asked
go
to
pray
work.
about it.
And then when work dried up, I would say, if you could send some, that'd be great. And he did. And so, I mean, I can attest to that, that does work.
You know, it's funny. When we launched the bike shop and we were a few years into it, we had so many weird stories because it's like the lesson I can never learn, where like you come to this moment where it's like existential threat because of finances or whatever, income, and like organizationally even. And it's like the sky is falling. Like we're going to have to close all this down. And then these weird things happen. These weird things come in. And like, like I remember right when like COVID hit and like all of the bike related stuff had sold out. Like you couldn't get it from no bike shop could get it. It didn't matter how much money you had. You couldn't get it.
Yeah.
And we couldn't, so inner tubes, like we couldn't get them. And then this like Amazon warehouse that I'd never heard of. We get this phone call and this guy's like, "Hey, I'm closing down. I'm an Amazon reseller and I have like pallets of inner tubes. Can you come pick them up?" And I'm like, what? First of all, why do you have that? And do you not know what's going on right now?
That's some
But like
George
these
Mueller stuff.
and there's so many of these stories like that. And I remember Chris, my coworker, co-founder in that enterprise, just said to me one day jokingly, but he's like, "I think we should rename the shop like the Mana Bike Shop." Because he's like, that's kind of like what's happening here. Like, and the lesson I can never learn is God provides, because every month or so I go into absolute like, it's the end. It's been a good run. It's time to lay down and die. And then something works. And I go, oh, next time, remember this. Remember like these weird things, and God provides. And then a couple weeks later,
Yeah.
I'm back to it's like the lesson I'm too dense to learn. I know that I know it. I could tell you, but existentially, I've had the hard time from like my bones to know.
The question I will have for God when I get up there someday, I've got like 3 zingers.
Yep.
One of them will be, did you ever really want us to save money ever? Because it seemed really wise to do.
Seems like a good idea. It seems like someone you might want to do that.
But every time we've tried to save money, like every time, something obliterates it.
Can't be
And
done.
so we're not gonna, so we've now lived not saving. And every time I go, just being an idiot, but I really do want to ask him, like, does the mana thing, does that apply across the board? Even to today, will you provide exactly what we need for today? I just hope he winks and goes, yeah, that's the way I want it. Like I want every
I
one of
do
you
think it's
suckers to
related
go.
to like a couple weeks ago, or I don't know, we posted it early, but the like the idea, the apocalyptic life, like there's something about like even the whole like I'm building houses so that they're going to produce for me down the road. I think you're right about that. Like there's something we want to build. We want to be wise and shrewd with our resources. But also there is kind of an anticipatory, like I do think there is something about like I don't want to be like the end is near in the sense of like for but like there is a bit of like for tomorrow we die. Like we kind of we have this open posture toward the future, which is like major vulnerability and a lack of control, maybe, that I think like wisdom or something in us would long for. It's like protect against death
Yeah.
and storms and things to come. And it's a buttressing against potential futures. But I do
Mhm.
think something about that, like living day by day, tomorrow has enough, like today has enough concerns of its own.
So can
Um,
we entitle this apostolic funding um not your friend Dave Ramsey? Like what are we saying? Like, because I would tell young couples, yeah, you should
Terrible
read that
title.
stuff. Like, there's some good stuff in there, but for
Oh
apostolic
man.
leaders, I don't know if any, like, Dave Ramsey would not he would put us in the hall of shame,
For
He
sure.
would put
all of us.
he would put Jesus in the Hall of Shame.
So I don't know.
I mean, for real, as I do think that there's truth to that. Stop. We all should. We should take warning. That's not a great title, but stop teaching truths as if they're universal. Right now, we're talking primarily to people who know it, they feel it. I've been called to something that feels different. And we're saying we understand you. It's okay. You're not crazy. Don't go do something crazy. This is kind of why people like this do crazy stuff. Is because they think they're crazy.
Mm-hmm.
They think they're outsiders, and so they start living like it, and they start making really kooky decisions. Don't do that. Know that you have a unique presence and command and courage. It's all from the Lord. You should not pride yourself in it for one day. But also, there's a lot of conventional teaching on finances that don't apply to you.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of radical teaching that we would be accused of on finances that I would say don't apply to a lot of people. And it's okay.
But like, I just want to add to like, talk about a radical teaching. Like, I'm like, Jesus in particular, like, why do you worry about clothes? See the flowers of the field grow, they don't labor or spin. And I tell you, Solomon in all of his splendor wasn't dressed like one of these. And like, don't worry about what you'll eat or what you'll drink or what you'll wear. The nations run after these things, but your heavenly Father knows you need them. But seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. There's a way in which it's funny. I heard
Do you
Alan
think he was
Watts. Alan Watts one time said, like, you'll never hear a sermon on that because that is unacceptable ideas. The economy would crash.
Do you think Jesus was only talking to apostolic prophetic leaders there?
I know. I believe he was talking
Yeah,
to his people. And I
I
want to
agree.
add though, this is like when we're talking about apocalyptic living, maybe this is for another day. Maybe we could do something on this. But everything we're talking about in terms of finance and the whole apocalyptic like life, because I think there is something related here, like day by day kind of manna faithfulness. But I do think it's important to recognize that all of this exists in the context of community. So like like monastic life or
Yeah,
something like that.
without
When you look at
community, this is nonsense.
it's crazy if you're
Yeah.
not sharing. Like it's only possible because we lean on one another. And so I do think it's important to like to say that alongside all that we're saying, because it's actually our security is social. It's like among each other. You know, this is why the Franciscans, they could take vows of poverty individually. But I
Yeah.
don't know if you've like hung out with some Franciscans, but they're good. They got everything they need.
Yeah.
It's
But
just
this is also why teachings like do not be anxious, do not worry about tomorrow make sense.
Yeah.
right.
Without brave city architecture, they don't make sense, man.
Yep. Yep. You should toil and spin for sure if you don't have community on mission.
All
All
right.
right.
This was a good one. Glad we did
Thoughts to
this.
ponder.